Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today I am doing my top 10 favorite books of 2018. You guys are gonna have to forgive me just a little bit. I have a cold and I am so mad because I almost never get sick, and I usually only get sick when I'm like really stressed out, and for some reason I'm sick right now, and I really wasn't stressed out recently, but I'm getting over a cold. It's not terrible, but it's not great, so I'm sitting down today and I sound terrible, so I apologize in advance for that, but I really wanted to get this video up before 2019 as it is rapidly approaching. So we're just gonna dive right in. We'll go over like how many books I read and all that kind of stuff. I'll be doing a goals video coming out in like a week or so for 2019, and I'll be like reviewing 2018 in that video. So if you guys are interested in like how many books I read and all that stuff, I will be talking about that there. This year I listened to quite a few audiobooks, so what I've come to find out is that majority of my favorite books this year were audiobooks, and part of that was because I was listening to a lot of really hyped new releases or really hyped backlist books, meaning books that have been out for a while but are really popular. And so naturally I was going to like those a little bit more than the books that I physically read. Plus with audiobooks you get that added element of sound and voices and sometimes even sound effects and music, and so that for me, because I'm such a naturally visual person, the added element of not just like sitting looking at a book but also like hearing it helped me visualize what was happening a little bit better. So while I love reading, of course, and I definitely read more physical books, I actually favorited more audiobooks than I did physical reading. Tomorrow I'm coming out with a favorite audiobooks of 2018, and if I was to combine the list and just pick favorite books of 2018, there would probably be mostly audiobooks, if that makes sense. So while these are my top 10 that I physically read, they're not necessarily my top 10 like overall. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So I'm not going to be going like from least favorite to most favorite because I had a really hard time trying to decide that ranking, and honestly most of these are pretty even with my fondness for them, so I'm just going to be listing off some of my favorite reads from this year. One last thing, I'm not including any of my rereads on this favorites list because that really wouldn't be fair. I wanted to include only the books that I read this year, and also these are not books that came out this year, these are just books that I happened to read this year. So there are a couple that came out this year, maybe one or two, but majority of them are just books that I read and enjoyed, so just keep that in mind. So we have 2 classics, 2 adult books, and 6 young adult books to talk about, so we're just gonna dive right in. We're gonna start off with my favorite classics. So Frankenstein made it on the list this year. I was really thinking about it, and it's not that I read this and just like super was into it and couldn't stop reading it or whatever, but I really took my time and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the story, and I enjoy the story in other formats too. I enjoy it in the form of retellings, I enjoy it in the form of movies, and so just overall like as a basis for literature and horror and sci-fi and just like all the backgrounds that you know about Frankenstein, and my enjoyment of reading it despite it being very different than what I thought and very lengthy and very wordy. This one made it onto the list because it's one of those ones that I keep thinking about and I look back with like a lot of fondness. So if you guys aren't familiar with Frankenstein, I don't know what to tell you, but it's about a guy who creates his own monster from bringing monsters to life, and the monster kind of does some things, and basically we have to decide if Frankenstein, the person that created the monster, is the monster, or if the monster is a monster. And this one is really good. It's definitely not going to be for everybody. If you are new to classics, this is not necessarily one to start with, but for me this one is like fondly in my heart now. Now I did say I wasn't going to include any rereads, but because I read this one probably 20 years ago, I'm going to include it, and I'm not even entirely sure if I read it as a kid or if I just watched the movie. But The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett is a classics tale about a little girl who was raised in India by her wealthy parents, and they wind up dying, and she winds up having to move to like, I think it's either Ireland or England, very gloomy, dreary manor, to live with her uncle. Now Mary is very spoiled and used to having everything her way, and that is not how it is at this castle, and so she has to quickly learn to grow up and also to learn things about herself, and along that way she finds some mysterious things that are happening in the castle that she uncovers, such as a secret garden and a few other things as well. This one is probably one of the only, I think this is one of the only books that made me cry. I hysterically sobbed reading this book. Now, not because it was sad or anything like that. Like I rarely tend to cry when things are sad. I tend to cry when things like hit me personally. And there are parts in this with a little boy who is suffering from severe back pain, and he has let his mental state slash what everyone is telling him around him take over his body and his mind, and he basically doesn't think he's ever going to be well, and he's given up, and he winds up kind of overcoming that. And I have a lot of back pain and things that I'm healing right now, and I really believe in like the power of the mind and the power of your thoughts, and I haven't been as focused on it this year as I have in the past. And so this one, with that kind of almost quantum physics-esque style and like believing in magic and like the universe and like all that kind of stuff, was like hidden in here. And this book's almost 100 years old, so it's really ahead of its time for that purpose. And there are a lot of things that you can get out of this that I wouldn't have gotten out of it as a kid, and it just made me sob my eyes out. They do a little chant in here about magic, and I literally started chanting it every day, and I loved it so much. And they changed that in the movie, and they made it more witchy, which normally I like witchy stuff, but this one was just more like, I don't know, like whimsical and fun, and I just loved it so much. It meant so much to me. Frances Hodgson Burnett is a beautiful writer. These Barnes & Noble Classic editions are amazing. They have like the classic illustrations from like the older books, and I loved it so much. Next up, we're going to talk about Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler, and with art by Mara Kallman. Daniel Handler is Lemony Snicket, who is the author of the series of Unfortunate Events. This one made it onto this list. It's not necessarily like one of my favorite books of all time, but this one I almost read in one sitting / one day. I literally couldn't stop. I had to know what happened. So this one is told a couple that has broken up from the girl's perspective, and she's dropping off a box of her ex-boyfriend's stuff to his house, and she's basically writing him a letter while she's driving there and explaining why everything is in the box and why they wound up breaking up. And it has like art in here and drawings, and it's just such a beautiful book. So it'll have like a poster. She'll go back and talk about the memory of that poster and why it's in here and why like there were little signs of why they were gonna break up, and like I don't know. It was so well done, and it was so good, and of course it was really sad, but kind of good, like happy overall. And this one just really stuck with me. I thought it was really genius. It has a Prince Award for Excellence for Young Adult Literature. Totally agree. It's not going to be for everyone, but I really liked this book a lot, and it really stuck with me, and so that's why it made it on this list. Next up, we're going to talk about Daughter of the Pirate King by Patricia Levenseller, particularly this first book. This one is so much fun. This one is on here purely for the fact that it just made me smile, and it was so fun. And Aloza is one of my new favorite female protagonists of all time. So this one is, of course, about the daughter of a pirate king who has been raised to be fierce and sassy and strong, and she is going on a mission for her dad, and things go awry. I loved this one so much. This is one of my favorite like love stories. This is definitely one of my favorite female protagonists. It was so funny, it made me laugh out loud. They compare her to a Lady Jack Sparrow, and that is just like super accurate. It's so much fun. I couldn't stop reading it. It was really quick. I would read like 100 pages at a time, and it was just, you know, it wasn't like the most amazing book in the whole world, but this was just one that it just makes me smile every time I see it on my shelf because I loved it so much. And the second book is really good too. Not quite as good as this one, but I really enjoyed it as well. Next up, we're going to talk about A Madness So Discreet by Mindy McGinnis. What? The biggest shock of the year, a Mindy McGinnis book made it on my top 10. I don't know if you guys have been following me for a while, but I read Not a Drop to Drink in 2017, and it was one of my least favorite books of the year, and it was one of the books that I actually got passionately mad about for multitude of different reasons. The accuracy level was so off, and just the whole premise was wrong, and the way it was pitched was wrong, and just, I like her writing style, I don't know. So I gave this book a chance. This one is about Grace, who is from a wealthy family in the Victorian era, and she winds up becoming pregnant, and her family sends her away to an asylum basically until the deed is done so that they can pretend like she's not pregnant and not look bad in society. And she winds up having to stay in the asylum because she's like so upset, and she winds up doing things that get her in trouble. And then it takes like a detective type style twist where she winds up becoming a detective. But that's spoilers, it's all in the description. This one has like a Sherlock Holmes type of vibe to it. I love the Victorian era. It's one of my favorite eras to read about, and it was just so well done. This is technically this was classified as a thriller, but I really considered it more of a mystery. The thriller aspect is just not there, but I don't know, I just loved the characters. Mindy McGinnis is very, very good at writing characters, and when I finished this one, I was actually really sad because I wanted to just like pick it up and keep reading or read another one, and it didn't happen. So anyway, this one is one I keep thinking about as well, so I decided to put it on this list. Next up, we're going to talk about Tiger Lily by Jodi Lynn Anderson. This one has been on my reading to-do for a long time. This is one of my favorite YouTubers' favorite books, Margot Woods, who used to be with Epic Reads, and this is a Peter Pan retelling told from Tiger Lily's perspective. So Tiger Lily is a side character from a tribe in the land of Neverland, and this was so beautiful. I took my time reading this, even though I read it in like 2 days, and it was just so beautiful and well done and sweet, and it covered important topics, and you got your Peter in there, and it was just heart-wrenching, and I still think about how beautifully written this is and how unique and different. I love retellings, I love Peter Pan retellings, but this one is my favorite. Next up, I'm going to talk about a couple that I don't own, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about Restore Me by Tahara Mafi. This one was one of the most fun books that I read this year. I would get up super early to read this book. I finished it lightning speed fast. I just love our Shatter Me world. This is, if you're not familiar with, this is the 4th book in the Shatter Me series. It's a continuation of the original trilogy, so I can't say too much about it, but you get a certain perspective in here that I love so much it made me not like our main character as much as I did our new perspective. And I don't know, it wasn't like amazingly well written or anything like that. There were parts that were kind of boring, but I just didn't care because I just love the characters. I love the world. I think it's really cool to see what happens after the effects of, like, usually dystopian books like end and you never get to see how things kind of heal, and that's kind of what's happening in this one with like some new twisty things going on. And the ending to this one was just like, what? The ending to this one was probably the most mind-blowing out of all of the like books and things I read. I think it's gonna wind up not being that way in the 4th and the 5th book, but for now it was definitely like, oh my god, I have to wait another year for the next book. Like that one, it was that kind of good. This is one of the only books that I read like the day that it came out because I got it in from the library really quickly. I loved it so much, and I cannot wait. I'm probably gonna do a whole Shatter Me reread next year. Next up, we're gonna talk about Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, aka Shannon McGuire. This is my first Shannon McGuire / Mira Grant book. I read this one for Spookathon this year. This one is an adult book about killer mermaids, basically, and it sounds ridiculous, and it is, but it was so well done that it really felt realistic. So this one is about a company, I think they're called Imagine & Co. or Imagine Inc., and they are filming mockumentaries of mythical things like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and things like that, and they film these really impressive like mockumentaries that make it seem like it's real and it's just like for fun. And so they go out to do one on mermaids, and their ship winds up not returning, and they wind up having horrifying footage of the crew being attacked, and then they are quickly trying to cover up what is happening. So the premise of this book is that they are gathering a team of like mermaid specialists, aka people in the scientific world that get made fun of for studying mermaids, and powerful hunters and FBI agents, scientists, and more, to send them out again on another voyage back to the Mariana Trench to figure out what happened. And crap goes down. This book is huge, and there are a lot of characters to follow, but they are so fleshed out, they are so diverse, they are so interesting. There's even some deaf representation in here, which was so cool to learn about, and I just was so impressed because it was such a large book, and I picked it for a readathon, and I was like, this is really dumb. It was like 440 pages, but it's an adult book, so it's quite large and quite wordy, and I got through it in like 2 or 3 days. And if you guys want to watch that vlog, it's hilarious. It's basically me being terrified the entire time. This is the scariest book I've ever read, but I loved it so much. It was so realistic. Our mermaids are more like what could actually happen, like creatures of the deep rather than like magical, mystical fairies. And although I love that style of mermaid, this was so interesting and so well thought out and fun, and I cannot wait for book 2. The ending of this book was a little lackluster, but I think it's because it's going to be a series, and I recently found out it was originally based on a novella by Mira Grant about the same basically the same thing, and they're going to make a TV show out of it, and I'm really scared, but I'm really excited to watch it. So yeah, I was really proud of myself for reading this one. My second adult book that I read was Uprooted by Naomi Novak. This one almost made it to like my #1 spot. I still can't decide what I want my #1 book to be, but this one has been on my TBR again for a very, very long time. So this one is adult, but it is very, very appropriate for a young adult. There's like one minor little sex scene in here, so you kind of use your own discretion on that. But other than that, it was very, very mild, and I really, really enjoyed it. It definitely took me a lot longer to get through. Like, it's definitely more of a dense read. It's not crazy long or anything, but you kind of want to take your time because the magical system and everything in here is very well thought out. So this one is technically a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This one is set in its own unique world. So we have Agnieszka, who is in her little town, and their little town is kind of overruled by an interesting king. And they have a wizard that lives in a tower called the Dragon, and every 10 years the dragon comes down, picks a girl to take with him and take him to his tower, and God knows what happens there, and then he comes back the next 10 years and picks another girl. And Agnieszka is convinced, and everyone in the town is convinced, it is going to be her best friend, Cassia, and then something happens. So this one is a beautiful love story, but it also has amazing politics behind it. The magical system, and there's an aspect of like magical woods in here, is so cool. I love magical woods, woodland type stories. It kind of gave me Into the Woods vibes, but like not really. But this one was so amazing. I can't wait to read Spinning Silver because I think it's set in like a similar world, but just not, it's not a sequel. But it was so beautiful. I love the love story. It was super, super cute and really, really fun, and there were lots of fun politics, and it kind of had everything for me. So it kind of splits itself. Like there's like love story stuff, and then it splits into more political, like prince and princess type stuff, more political type things. But I liked like all of it, so it was great. And lastly, we are going to talk about Illuminae by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Now, I did read Gemina as well, but I'm not going to include it on this list, even though I liked it more, because I listened to it also, so I'm going to put it on my audiobook list. I'm so upset because I'm not done with Obsidio, and I guarantee you that it would have been on this list. It's the only book that I'm reading at the moment that I think would have made it on my top 10, but whatever. So Illuminae, if you guys are not familiar, is also a very unique experience. It is told in files and formats and chat logs, and every page looks different and cool, and there's art. And in the second book, we get drawings from Marie Lu, and it's so unique and so different. It does take a second to get used to it, and I do highly recommend listening to them on audiobook and reading them at the same time. I did that with Gemina, and it was like mind-blowing because you get the visual aspects that you will miss things if you just listen to the audiobook, plus they're so cool and fun to look at. But then you also get a full cast audio and different sound effects and all that stuff. So I'll go into that more in my audiobook wrap-up when I talk about Gemina. But this one I read in one day on an airplane. I had a like 5-hour flight with a 4-hour layover and all kinds of stuff going on, and I was so glad because it was so fast-paced, so action-oriented. I only gave this one 4 stars, even though it's on this list, because I did like Gemina better, but it was just phenomenal. I'm giving it to I gave it to my brother for Christmas. Hopefully he loves it too. I feel like this is one of those books that like everybody could enjoy. So I've really had a great time, and I loved reading in a different format. It was so new, and it was so capturing, and it was perfect for vacation as well. Okay, you guys, those are my top 10 favorite books of 2018 that I physically read. So let me know down below in the comments some of your favorite books of the year, and I will be back tomorrow with my top audiobooks of 2018. I don't know if I'm going to do 10 or not. There's probably going to be more. So just stay tuned if you're interested in that, because there are some amazing books on there as well, and I will see you guys next time on The Bright Side. Bye!